Hello, and thanks for coming to this webinar to learn more about Drexel University Archives Online Collections Database. My name is Sarah Newhouse, and I'm the Digital Archivist in the Drexel University Archives. This webinar will be a combination of slides and a live demo of our Archival Collections database, during which I'll go over what kinds of information you can find in the database, what kinds you can't, how search and filtering functions work, and what to do if you find archival materials that you would like to see in person or just learn more about. And of course, this is going to be a live demo, so the system I'm showing you today may change. We are always tweaking things, adding new collections, and making small changes to provide you with better access to our collections. So if you're watching in the future, keep that in mind. So let me switch to my browser. So this is the front page of our Archival Collections database. It lives at archivalcollections.drexel.edu, and it runs on a system called ArchiveSpace, so you may hear archivists refer to it that way sometimes. The first thing to know about this database is that it does not include digitized images from our collections. This database just includes information about our collections, the same way that a library's catalog contains information about the physical books on its shelves, and you can then use that catalog to find the books on the shelves or to request an item. We actually do have some items digitized from our collections and available online, but they live in a completely different repository, which is called IDEA, and you can find that at idea.library.drexel.edu. I did another webinar that covers using IDEA, and you can find that in the Drexel Library's YouTube channel. That one is called Get to Know Drexel Archives Online Historical Resources. So you may not know this, but Drexel University has 3 different archival units under its umbrella. This database searches across the 3 different archives at Drexel. It contains information about collections from the University Archives, where I work, but also the archives at the College of Medicine, which is called the Legacy Center, and the archives at the Academy of Natural Sciences. These 3 repositories cover different materials and subject areas. The Drexel University Archives contains documents created by or documenting the history of Drexel University. The Legacy Center at the College of Medicine collects documents and photographs about women in medicine and the history of homeopathic medicine, as well as the history of the college. And the archives at the Academy of Natural Sciences contain the history of the Academy and its biological collections, and the history of natural sciences more broadly. But before we look at how this database functions, let me show you the kinds of records it contains. This is important because records about archival collections are very different from records about library resources. So it's helpful to know something about the data in the database before understanding how to use the database itself. Let me pop back to my slides. Okay, so the basic unit in an archival database is called a finding aid, which is a bit of a jargony, old-fashioned term, but it basically just means that this kind of record is an aid to helping you find things in an archival collection. You may also hear people refer to them as collection guides. An archival collection is a group of records or other material, like photographs, maps, artwork, letters, meeting minutes, that were all created by the same person or group of people, or they were collected and donated by the same person or group. So one archives contains many different collections, all organized around who created them. And each collection can contain 1, 10, 100, 1,000 boxes of material, and one box can contain tens, hundreds, or thousands of pieces of paper or other items. And as a digital archivist, I should emphasize that when I say box, you can imagine folder or directory, and piece of paper could also mean file or data. So if we were to compare an archives collections database to a library catalog, the main difference is that a library catalog record usually corresponds to one item. One record equals one book or represents one book. But in archives, we have a record or a finding aid that has to describe hundreds or thousands of items inside a single collection. So we end up with pretty complicated records, which is why we have separate systems and separate databases to create and provide access to those records. So that complex record is a finding aid for a collection. And again, a collection, a bunch of stuff created by one person or one group. And that finding aid will contain three main types of information. Contextual, descriptive information that tells you more about what's in the collection and who or what created it. An inventory that describes box by box and folder by folder the contents of the collection. And administrative information that tells you about the collection's history and its place in the archives. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the administrative data today, but feel free to ask questions if you have any. All right, so let's go look at a live finding aid. There we go. Okay. So the descriptive information in a finding aid shows up in a couple of different places. Most of it is in this Collections Overview tab. The title of the collection tells you, usually, who or what created the collection. This one was created by the Drexel Players, which was a student-run theater group here at Drexel. And note that in big red letters at the top, we can tell that this record is describing an entire collection. So boxes and folders and lots of individual items inside those folders. And you can also get information in this tab about how this collection is organized. Archival collections are broken down into series, which is another kind of jargony term that really just means groups of similar stuff. We can see that this collection is broken down into series and also sub-series inside those series. And if you are eagle-eyed, you may have noticed that these series titles also appear in this collection inventory on the right. So you get a narrative description of how the collection is arranged on the left, in complete human readable sentences. And on the right, you can see how that collection arrangement actually plays out in the collection. This is a hierarchical view that lets you click on the series and see the sub-series inside that series. And then if you click on a sub-series, you can see the items inside that sub-series. So we're going through smaller and smaller groups until we get to the individual items inside those groups. As you navigate through a collection, the items in some of the text in the left will tell you what kind of record you're looking at, whether it's a series, an item, or a whole collection. You can see that where this, if you look at the record for the entire collection, there's red text here telling you you're looking at a record for an entire collection. If you're looking at a series, this now tells us we're looking at a series, and so on down through sub-series and an individual item. So the information will change as you click down through the hierarchy. And once you get to the smallest level of description, you'll usually see information about where that item is located inside the collection. So the scrapbook for Midsummer Night's Dream production from 2003 is in box 1, folder 2. And the breadcrumbs along the top of the page here will always help you orient yourself to where you are in the collection. So this item is in the sub-series about scrapbooks, which is part of the series called the Drexel Players, which is part of the Drexel Players Records, which is owned by Drexel University Archives. There are a few other important things. Let's jump back to the collection level record. A few other important things in the finding aid that you should know about. But again, not covering everything today. So if you have questions or about something I didn't get to, please ask at the end. So some of the most notable other information is that if you scroll down, there's actually a lot of stuff hidden down here under these other tabs. I'm just going to expand all of it so we can see everything at once. For example, the administrative history of Drexel Players would be very useful if you came to this finding aid and were wondering who they were and if this collection would be useful to you. This will generally tell you who created the collection. And this is a particularly thorough historical note down here with lots of information about the group. And if you could mute, that would be great. There's also a list of subject headings, which should be a pretty familiar concept if you're used to library catalogs or Amazon. These are subjects or keywords that an archivist has assigned to this collection because they describe the contents. Clicking on one of these will take you to a list of everything else in the database that's tagged with that same subject heading. And then there's some administrative stuff down here, which I'm not going to cover, but if anything's confusing, please do ask. So that's an overview of a finding aid. The nourishing chocolatey center at the middle of our archives collections database. And these are complex records by necessity because our collections are complex groups of materials that are often difficult to describe. So if you run into any confusion while searching through this database, please do contact us. You can always reach us at archives@drexel.edu. But now that we've looked at a single finding aid, let's back up and look at how you get to these. So I'm going to jump back to the main page. So looking at the categories across the top of this page, you'll see that you have a couple of options to view repositories, collections, subjects, and names that are all part of this database. Clicking on repositories will show you all of the archival units that are part of this database, so all the ones I mentioned earlier. The Academy of Natural Sciences, the University Archives, and the College of Medicine Legacy Center. Clicking on one of these repositories' names will take you to a page with more information about them, most importantly, how to contact them if you see something in here that you would like to know more about or to make an appointment to come see. You can also use this page to just look at collections from that repository, to just look at the subject headings they've used to tag their finding aids, or just the names that are mentioned in their finding aids. And you can also use this to just search within that repository's records. Jumping back up to the top of the page, you can also click on collections, which will give you an alphabetical list of all of the collections across all three repositories. And there are a bunch of facets on the right to help you narrow down this list. These are the same facets that you'll see in the search results, which we're going to get to in a second. You can limit the collections you're seeing by repository, of course, so you can just look at stuff from Drexel University Archives, or you can narrow down by subject or by name. And subject and name are the other two options up at the top. Clicking on these will give you a list of all the subject headings and names that are assigned to finding aids. And you can click on one to view all of the materials across all of the repositories that are tagged with these things. So I've got a collection and a file that are tagged with academic health systems. So now let's talk about the search function. Search functions are usually pretty self-explanatory, but there are a couple things that I want to point out here. The first is that searching searches everything in the database. So that means, yes, it searches across all three repositories, but it also searches not just for finding aids or those collection guide records. It also searches the smaller components inside of finding aids, like a series, which again is a grouping inside a collection, or a folder, which can be inside the series, or individual items, which can be inside folders. So just to show you how this works, let's search for theater, because I know that one will give us good results. So the search results we get here are a smattering of the different kinds of records that are in this database. You can see we're getting hits on individual items that have the word theater in them. We are getting folders of material that are labeled with the word theater. So this is a whole folder of material about the Mandel Theater from 1985. And I think there's also a collection. Yeah, here's a whole collection with the word theater in the title. So when you're searching, it's always really important to look for these colored labels that'll tell you what kind of information you're getting in your search results, whether you're getting information that could be about 50 boxes of material or information that's about a single program from November 11th, 1998, one item. And of course, if you click through to a single item, you will see this, this isn't a great example, but you will see these breadcrumbs up top that help you orient yourself to where you are in the collection. If you've attended or watched any of my other webinars, you'll know how obsessed archivists are with context and preserving context for historical materials. And the way the system works is absolutely a function of that. We always want you to know how a single item relates to an entire collection. We never want you to just look at a single item as a search result and be confused or unsure about where it fits into the larger collection. The other thing about searching to note is that you do have an option here to limit your search to digital materials. And you will see records in your search results that are labeled digital records. Even though you can search for digital materials, I'm asking you not to search for them and to ignore digital records when they pop up in your search results. Let me show you why. So this category of materials is a bit misnamed because digital materials are not digitized images from our archives. We have a whole separate database for that, like I mentioned at the beginning. This is actually just a record that represents the fact that we have digitized something from our collections, and we mostly use it internally to track our digitization process. That's why most of the titles of digital records are just strings of numbers that are not helpful in any way. We're in the process of removing these from the database, but until that happens, please ignore. And if you want to see digitized materials, you can go to that other repository, which again is, still have it up, which again is IDEA, which is idea.library.drexel.edu, completely different system. So now you know how to read a finding aid, how to search, how to find information about individual items or folders inside a collection. So what happens if you find something you're interested in and you want to come see a collection, or you want us to digitize something for you? I'm going to jump back to my slides for this. So either way, whether you want to come see something or have something digitized, the first step is to email us. Give us as much information as you can about the items, folders, or collections that you've learned from our database, and let us know what your specific question is. While more details from the database are always helpful for us to have, you don't need to know exactly what you want when you contact us. You can always email us because an entire collection sounds interesting, or because you can't tell from the finding aid if the documents in the collection would be helpful for your particular research need. We're happy to do some legwork and go look at the materials for you, or just use our knowledge about the collections to give you more information. It's also really helpful to know what kind of service you're looking for, but don't worry if you don't know. People often contact us with questions about a collection and end up scheduling a research appointment to come see something for themselves. Or they email because they think they want to come see something, but then we can help them find out that actually what they're interested in is just 2 photographs from a 60-box collection. So they don't need to come see the whole thing. We can just digitize those photos and send them. If you want to come look at a collection in person, we can currently schedule time for you to come to Haggerty Library, if you're part of the Drexel community, and look at the materials in our reading room. Archival collections do not circulate, which means you cannot check them out and take them home with you. So you do need to come to us. If the library is open to students and Drexel staff, then the archives are too. And we have safety protocols in place to do our best to keep you and our staff safe during the pandemic. Most importantly, all of the protocols in the Dragon Pledge, like distancing and masks. And a big caveat here is that I'm recording this in January 2021. We are still experiencing a global pandemic and all the complications that go along with that. So the ways that you can access our collections have changed from what they were in the past, and they will likely change again in the future. So before you make an appointment, please always check our library website for the most up-to-date information and library access procedures. If the library is open, if the library is not open, or if you can't make it in, we are happy to digitize things for you. We'll digitize them even if we're open. Again, just email us with as much information as you can give us about what you want digitized, and we'll get back to you with a timeline. There is often a queue of other digitization requests, so please don't expect an overnight turnaround. Give us a couple days to get your files to you. We will scan archival materials into JPEGs, TIFFs, or PDFs. You can tell us what you'd prefer. And we'll transfer those to you via a shared drive, or we can email them if they're small enough. And of course, if you want to publish the materials anywhere, we'll have you sign a usage agreement, which basically just says we give you permission to publish and you acknowledge that you are following copyright laws. So that's a very quick overview of our collections database. I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable now using it and more empowered to search for and use our collections. The whole reason that archives keep things is so that you can use them, and we want this database to make that easier. So please search, click, explore, and contact us with any questions. You can reach the entire archives team. There's just 3 of us. We're all very friendly at archives@drexel.edu. And that's often the fastest way to get a response because whoever's free will get back to you. Or if you feel more comfortable emailing somebody you've met, you can email me at first initial last name snewhouse@drexel.edu. So thank you for attending. I hope you find some great stuff in our collections. Happy to open the floor to questions.